A big story today, and this is a really big deal, actually. It's been called a victory for all schools. This was the case which saw a Muslim pupil and her mum actually take a school to court at the Michaela School in London. She was basically saying she was essentially being discriminated against because she wasn't given the opportunity to pray during the school day. A High Court judge now has basically ruled that the school was acting in a manner that was lawful and she was not being discriminated against. This is a big case, this, because if it had gone the other way, Alex, the ramifications for this could have been potentially quite huge.
That's right, but I don't actually think this is a debate or a judgment about prayer. I think it's a debate and a judgment about schools being able to decide their own rules, which is a principle which I completely support. The judgment is, to the extent that I've been able to digest it, is excellent. And it makes the point that the parents and the child concerned impliedly accepted the school's secular position when they, during the course of the admission process, and drawn as they were explicitly, as they say, to this school because it was strict. And the school says this is not a school where people pray. And their head teacher, no stranger to the headlines herself, has made it clear this is not about persecuting some minority in the school. Indeed, as it happens, she makes the point it's a Muslim majority school. It's the point about having the same rules for everybody, minority and majority alike. So the point is, any harm done to your rights is legitimate and proportionate to achieving the legitimate aims of the school, which is education and fairness to all pupils, and I think it's the right decision.
Before I bring you in, James, let's just listen at the head teacher we mentioned there, Catherine Berbelsing. She was speaking out. This is her earlier on this year. Listen to what she had to say.
We all need to recognise that all of us need to make sacrifices for the betterment of the whole so that we can all get on, and that schools play such an important part of this. Now, obviously, if your school is one where the children roam the corridors and the children do whatever they like during lunch, then I suppose you might choose to have a prayer room, and that's fine. You know, I'm not suggesting that all schools shouldn't have a prayer room, but I do think that if a school's ethos is such and building is such that they cannot have a prayer room, then...
James, what do you make to it all?
So I broadly agree with Alex on the legal front, and that this is more to do with what schools are allowed to decide, and if they are deciding it equally for all pupils of different faiths. It does seem that the way the school have managed it implies hasn't been managed terribly well, both from that clip we just heard, and then there's a little bit from the judgment. The child was temporarily expelled from the school, or temporarily excluded from the school. Suspended, yeah. And that was overturned by the judge. So it seems like on the legal front, this is probably going in the right direction, but it suggests that, you know, if a pupil is trying to pray, suspension is probably not the right way. No,
she wasn't suspended for trying to pray. She was suspended. One of the accusations was that she'd threatened to stab another pupil. So the two were not...
That's completely separate.
The two were not... That's what I'm saying. The two were not linked.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's a separate thing. Just from hearing the head teacher there, I think if your school has a rule that you're a secular school and you basically don't do religion, I think that's absolutely fine. That's up to schools to decide. I think if pupils in that school wish to, you know, in a break between lessons, go into an empty classroom and pray together, that should also be absolutely fine.
But no, and this is the crux of the point. So this is what she's saying, Alex.
Yeah.
So that this head teacher, this is the real crux of this.
Yeah.
Because this girl, this student was essentially saying, you know, I want to do, like, I think it's, is it 1 o'clock or whatever time it is? She wanted to do it during the break.
At the time that suits me and in the manner that suits me and with the people that suits me. The trouble is, you know, of course, you don't know if I was praying during your introduction, and as it happens, I wasn't, but I might have been silently praying away and doing no harm. One reads between the lines here a bit and thinks, once you start the group of children praying in this, bear in mind, Muslim majority school, once a group of them start praying, are those who don't join in bad Muslims? And are those who don't join in because they're not Muslims then excluded from the activity? And you can see why the school is trying to maintain a universal rule and trying to keep community cohesion together by saying no prayers for everyone. I note that in the judgment, it was said by the judge that prior to this attempt to legitimise prayer in school, the child knew that they couldn't pray at school and would save up their prayers and do it at home. Well, they already knew that they weren't supposed to pray in school. That's what they signed up for when they applied.
Indeed. And one of the things actually that I find quite interesting is the head teacher, she's talking about, you know, if you've got faith schools or whatever, then ultimately you as a school should have the right not to have things like the black group, the Hindu group, the Muslim group, the LGBT group, etc., etc. She prides herself, this school, I mean, I've got to say for the record, I think this sounds like an absolutely fabulous school. I would be absolutely delighted if my child went to this school. It's rated outstanding by Ofsted and all the rest of it, but there has been quite ramifications to this. Listen to Catherine, the head teacher again, James, some of the comments that she's made about this.
Support staff right now, they come and see me very frightened. They're really scared. And gosh, last year, my goodness, I mean, that was the worst. It was, I mean, it's not right that a head teacher or teachers should be put under that kind of stress because they're just trying to do their jobs.
It's not right. And if you don't like the rules of the school, don't send your kid there. It's not difficult, is it?
I couldn't hear what she was referring. She
was basically saying
put under a lot of stress, but it didn't say what it
teachers were hassled. Apparently, there'd been some apparent bomb threats made towards this school. Teachers being threatened and things like that.
Well, of course, I mean, no school should get bomb threats or threatened of any sort, and nor should any teachers. And we're now starting to talk about things that. We probably all of us don't know very much about, but I certainly don't know much about the details. But I think that there are two things which we can separate out here. One is the legal thing, and the other is how not to do with the law, but how can you run a school in a way that is inclusive within the parameters of which you've already set?
You're absolutely right. They're separate debates, but there's an interesting connection because you're entitled to say, I want to do this, indeed to test your position in law. I want to be able to do this in my school. And the school's entitled to say, back in the end, if you don't like it, choose another school. But then you fray at the boundaries of what's acceptable in society. You fray at what underpins us as a liberal democracy to say, if I don't get my way, rather than just accepting the judgment, or rather than just accepting what the headmaster says, or what the school rules say, I'm going to threaten you and I'm going to say I'm going to come and do you harm unless I get my way. And at that point, no matter how much sympathy I might have had with your right to take a position or say that you want to do something, I've got no time for that at all.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if anyone is saying that they're going to do another person harm, physical harm, etc., I mean, when you have lost a debate, then you start hitting the other person on the head. So, I mean, I think we can all agree on that.
I think this mother, this pupil, she's got a cheek, quite frankly, because she apparently wants to send a sibling, a second child to this school come September, but then she also says, oh, and by the way, apparently there's another issue that she's not happy with, and has apparently sent a letter to the lawyers of the school. I mean, you couldn't make it up sometimes, I think.
That may not be cheap. As in, it might be. We don't know. But it could be the case where you've got a parent who likes a school because the school is very good. It's rated outstanding, etc. But they would like some aspect of its policy to be different. Ordinarily, when we see that in other circumstances, we say, well, that's an engaged parent. That's a good thing. Doesn't mean that she's going to get her way. Yes. Doesn't mean that they're going to change the policy because she would like it. But she's perfectly entitled to say, I like the school, I want to be part of it, but I would like this thing to be different. And then the school is also perfectly entitled to say, we've heard you, but no.
I might put the emphasis slightly differently. Parents are entitled to express their views about how things might be different at their schools. And as you rightly say, it demonstrates engagement in the school community to do so. But there is a hypocrisy in saying, I am drawn to this school because of these values. I'm drawn to it because I want it to be successful and strict in the way that it is. And now I insist, at the point of taking you to court, that you are different to the way that things are. And that, I think, is a bit much.
There's another key point to this, and many of you at home, you've already started getting in touch with me and asking me this question. Michelle, who's paid for all of this? Well, the answer is you. And this is one of the points that Catherine Berbel-Singh, the head teacher, brings up in her letter. She actually asks, can it be right for a family to receive £150,000 of taxpayer-funded legal aid to bring a case like this?
Well, I imagine that you'd both say that that's a good thing because you think that this is a very good judgment. And so for £150,000 to have found this judgment which goes in the direction that you want, which is now in law, does not seem to be a bad spending of money. It's not a spending of money. When legal aid is spent, it isn't only for the people that it is whose case it is. The purpose is it's for performing some kind of societal function. And in this case, which is setting out some legal framework that can be then taken forward, that's really the work it's done, rather than for the mother and the daughter who didn't get what they were after wanted anyway.
You're a barrister. What do you think?
I don't think I agree. And the reason I think I don't agree is that I don't think this was a point of law of general interest until the parents decided to take their own school through the legal process. Indeed, I think the people would largely have imagined the settled point was that headmasters are entitled to, certainly within the framework of admissions, to govern their own schools. So I'm not sure it was a point of general public interest in the way you imply. But moreover, there's a broader point here for me too, which is that unless you have unlimited funds, which no state does, you have to decide what you spend your resources on. And our legal aid budget is, no pun intended, already criminally underfunded. Yeah. And if you are deciding where that money goes, in my view, defending to the best of our ability people who are accused of crimes so as to ensure they have the best possible representation in court, because those are the cases in which people can go to prison, must take priority over cases like this, which uncharitably might be described as rather frivolous.
One of my viewers, Helen, says, Michelle, come on, a prayer for 5 minutes a day during lunchtime should be allowed. But Helen, it would be a slippery slope, though, because they have this kind of policy where they call it, they break bread. All of the pupils have vegetarian meals. They all sit together. They all are collective during lunch. I just want to read you as well. It's a really good statement. You could go and look it up yourselves. But she says things like, at Michaela, we want our children to live lives of dignity, whether they end up poor or rich later in life. A life of meaning is not about being rich. We believe that purpose and moral character matter and that there is such thing as moral truth. We tell our kids to be top of the pyramid, and our goal for them isn't to be the richest or even the most famous or even the cleverest. It is to be someone who lives a life of moral worth shaped by self-sacrifice, filled with gratitude for what they have and doing all that they can to help those who have not. I think it's a really interesting statement, that you should all read it. But one of the things that she talks about a lot in this statement is the fact that they have conservative small c values and they pride themselves as having that. After the break, this is exactly the point that I want to explore, because in Brussels the police have been called to try and close down an event that was all about national conservatism. So let's explore this, shall we? Why is being of the right politically such an issue for some?